Welcome, everybody. Today's guest is somebody that we're so thrilled to have. It's a deep breath I'm taking because we're going to talk today to the visual artist, Louie Schwartzberg. His visuals, if you're familiar with them on Netflix or in Disney or National Geographic, they're a prayer. They're a poem. They go from macro to micro, from high above the mountains to seeing an insect through a drop of water in a leaf. Louie's a pioneer in time-lapse photography, altered speed and scale cinematography. And this is what blew my mind. He's the only photographer shooting time-lapse flowers 24/7 for the past 4 decades. I'm not even sure what that means, but he's going to tell us. His TED Talks have had over 53 million views on YouTube. Slightly jealous on that. And his goal, he says, is to make the invisible visible, to touch our hearts, to take us on journeys of time and scale, to change our perspective and move us to action. Louie, it's such a pleasure to have you here.
Great to be with you.
This is the first time we've had a visual artist on the podcast, let alone on with your qualifications. So this is exciting. And I'm looking at mushrooms behind your head. So that we'll hear about that too. I need to yammer on just a second because guess who sent me a tribute to you? Your friend and mine, Nancy Davis.
Oh, great.
Who's the executive director of the Global Wellness Summit. This is Global Wellness Conversations. We are the voice of the summit and the Institute. So it's important that we hear from Nancy. Here's what she said about you, Louie. Ready?
Okay.
Louie Schwartzberg is the personification of his life's work. As he captures and shares the unfolding, unimaginable grace of nature, Louie is himself a force of nature and a gift to us all. His intelligence, warmth, humor, and elegant humanity have long been a signature element of the Global Wellness Summit. Whether he's opening our eyes to the universal truth in a drop of rain, urging us to care about the planet by showing us its beauty, not diminishing its assets, or by demonstrating the complex network of fungi that lies beneath our feet, Louie lives a life true to his mission to leave this world better than when he found it. That's sweet.
It is sweet. And Nancy is sweet. Nancy is a force of nature herself. And she pulls these events together with such grace that makes the Global Wellness Summit a joy to go to. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, our listeners should know that your visual art opens most every day of every summit. No matter how long we've stayed up to party with our friends, when we go there, we kind of crawl ourselves out of bed and get there. Quit. It's a Louie video. Come on. It's his film. So can you please tell our listeners how you first got involved with GWS?
Oh, I think probably it started when I think Michael Tompkins saw my gratitude video on YouTube, which I did at a TEDx talk in San Francisco, and that went viral. And then he invited me to go to Canyon Ranch. I had never been to a spa. I was probably like an old-fashioned male thinking spas were just for women, nothing against it, but I never thought about going to a spa and understood what like a Canyon Ranch or a Miraval, I'm sure it was Miraval, what that was like. And that's pretty cool. The first time you go to a spa, you go to Miraval, right? Anyways, so we connected. I did a little presentation there, and then he invited me to, he introduced me to Susie, and there was something in Washington, D.C. And I did that, and then Susie goes, I got this great idea. She goes, we are going to go to India, and it would be really great, to be a part of that. And that's how it all kind of kicked in.
Yeah, I know. It's so funny. Nancy said, I think I first met Louie when I drug him off the stage because the Dalai Lama was coming to speak at the GWS because they didn't really know if he'd show up. So that's okay to be upstaged by the Dalai Lama, right?
I upstaged him. He walked in and said he was just frozen by the imagery and that it was a hard act to follow.
Oh, isn't that so cool?
He's just a normal person.
Yeah. Everyone that I've ever read about that interacts with him is humbled by his humility,
Yeah.
But you know what? Everyone has heard, or if they're flipping through Netflix, they can find the moving art series that you did. I saw places I've been like Africa and Tahiti that I got a whole new appreciation through your work. But there's others like Thailand, Big Sur, the Blue Lagoon in Iceland, where some amazing spas and hot springs are. It made me think, By attending the Global Wellness Summit, Louie, have you been fueled your inspiration to go new places by the people you meet there?
No, absolutely. I mean, a good example, I met Jon Stewart, which, evolved into, me having to get an invitation to really see what they do and how
Yep.
they do it, which then evolves into, setting up like a cool visual healing room with my imagery there. And then, of course, Koh Samui is gorgeous and you want to film it. And then all of a sudden you look at the map and guess what? Angkor Wat is across the water in Cambodia. So I got to go shoot Angkor Wat, and it's just, so yeah, it does help you expand the world. I wouldn't have shot Angkor Wat actually if I hadn't connected with Jon Stewart.
And John,
And
we interviewed for this podcast. He's really sort of a holy person too. I mean, what he
totally,
does with people, right? In Thailand.
absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so
So
it's all connected in that way.
yeah,
Yeah.
speaking of connections, you were interviewed by my good friend Giselle Fernandez, who's the host of LA Stories. And she interviews people who make LA fascinating. And it makes sense. You're a filmmaker, you live near Hollywood, but since your camera takes you everywhere, why did you choose to live here, Louie?
Hmm. So after I graduated from UCLA, and I was into filmmaking, I moved to Northern California. I lived in Mendocino, a little town called Elk, population 200. Because part of the back to the land movement in the early 70s, and uh, you know the whole political sociological movement of, if you can't change the world, change your community. So it was a great time to do that, but as a filmmaker it was a challenge, because as a filmmaker the critical part is you have to have your film developed. It's not like video
Minor
back then.
detail.
And
Yeah.
so most filmmakers had to live near either LA, New York, or San Francisco, were the three cities, Chicago maybe as well, that had a lab that could process 35 millimeter movie film. So that forces those places to be the center. But what's really interesting, after about a couple of years living in Elk and having friends that were into carpentry and making pots and making leather, growing cannabis, it was like you need to collaborate with people that do your art, that do what you do. And what I discovered was, when I moved back to LA, was that people are a natural resource. So, I gave up the redwood trees and the river and the ocean. I lived in a little funky house, paid $150 a month of rent on a point overlooking the ocean and a river.
Oh my God.
I mean, it was idyllic in a beautiful way and good to experience it. But I came back to LA. And so LA, because of the fact that it was like a technological need to be here, it's still, I think people put their roots here, and the creative energy and the people you meet in LA is special, because you can make a film now anywhere with digital practically.
Right.
So that's no longer, important, but the roots of it are here. I mean, people don't have meetings anymore. Everybody does a Zoom, yet everybody's in LA. People it's crazy. Well, because of COVID and everything else, it's harder to have lunch.
Well, you and I are both in LA, but we're on Zoom. See there? So that's proof
Right.
of what you're saying. But, it is interesting to see in all your platforms, your podcast, your, Facebook page, everywhere that you are, the collaborations you have and the people that you've, your network, like the fungi has grown. Now, speaking of fungi, come on. You can rightly be called the master of mushrooms because of your gorgeous and popular Netflix film called Fantastic Fungi. But, I was just reading yesterday, Louie, in the New York Times. I don't know if you saw it, but it was an article about an evolutionary biologist. Her name is Dr. Kears.
Yeah.
She's working to make an atlas of the underground world of fungi in order to help fight climate change. And her quote was, "Humans are so concerned with the overground that they are literally missing half the picture." Does that support what you learned making the film?
Absolutely. I mean, their focus is, to fight against, global warming by creating an alliance with these allies that are under the ground. And the mycelial network, needs carbon. It captures carbon. It stores carbon under the ground. So if people can sort of understand the basic principles of life on Earth, what I'm talking about is, I think we have to explain the whole thing. There's a sun, there's sunlight. Plants take sunlight, they turn it into stored energy. When they do that, when they take in, CO2, they're releasing the oxygen for us to breathe. We have a great symbiotic relationship with plants. Inhale, exhale. The carbon goes down the branch into the trunk of the tree and into the roots, and it's traded for the nutrients of nitrogen and other important materials and sugars that the trees and plants need. So there's this beautiful shared economy under the ground, which allows ecosystems to flourish. So beyond this incredible, most natural solution for climate change, what I discovered, it's the most perfect example for how we need to live our lives. The wisdom of nature and how you apply it to your relationships, to your business, and to your society. It's the same thing. Ecosystems flourish when everybody does well, and everybody's trading stuff, and everyone is just like, enabling each other to flourish, and that is a good model. And it's just like right there, and so that's what is the great solution. The greatest natural solution for climate change is what I just described. Um, we burn fossil fuel. What is fossil fuel? Organic material.
Yes.
That's millions of years old or thousands of years old, and that's an organic material. Plants, they need carbon. And so all of it is stored energy from the sun, where that activates, matter to come together with carbon, which is, not a bad thing. It's just what life is made of as a material. But we burned it and we put it in the atmosphere. And that's pretty much a dumb move, So it's just beautiful that they mirror each other. You know what I mean? It's like nature's intelligence for sustainability, for a healthy planet, just the pure science of it is like what we need to do. But if you look at it with a little bit of, in a more of a transformational spiritual point of view, it is the code of life. This is how life flourishes. So why don't we follow that? Because it's the truth is there. It's really rare that you could point at anything and say that's the truth. That is solid truth, and we know it because we feel it. It isn't just a verification of the science as much as we emotionally connect with it as well. It's true.
Well, it's part of our DNA. I mean, we are related to it. And it feels to me, Louie, like you lifted the lid and said, it's right here. It's been here all along. Take a look. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, but I've been listening to your podcast. I hate to jump ahead, but I love who you talk to on that podcast. I love the name of it, Wonder and Awe. And so do your guests love the name of it. But that the composers that get the sound of birds, or the fabulous woman who did the soundtrack to Avatar and Spider-Man 2 and whatever. What is her name? Elizabeth Scott.
Yes. And she did the score for Gratitude Revealed, which we'll talk about maybe later. Yeah. She's great.
But I mean, just to see that they've lifted the lid too, and they see it and they feel it in their work. So if, I think during the pandemic, I was so encouraged that you did the Facebook Lives. It was probably a podcast too, but you said that you learned that we need to be connected and people are disconnected now. So let's come here together and reconnect, right?
Exactly. And again, that's what the mycelial network, again, was showing. I mean, the fact that everything is flourishing is because everyone is connected, and that is life. That is really nature's operating instructions. Everything functions as a network. Your neurological system is a network. Your respiratory system is a network. The universe is a network. The patterns are everywhere. They're replicated, and that gives me a lot of solace that there's some kind of intelligence. But we just have to step in and fall in sync with it, and be grooving with it, as opposed to destroying it, which
Destroying
makes no
it. Right?
fucking sense.
No,
You
so
wouldn't
true.
destroy your ancestry. You don't destroy your parents, but we are children of Mother Nature.
And you don't want to destroy your future either, which is so obvious. But you make me think of, I think it was King David said in a psalm, when I look at the heavens, the works of your hand, what is mortal man that you keep him in mind? And really that word awe, that you stop and take a breath and go, I had no idea it was this sophisticated, connected. So awe is the perfect word. Now, can you help us with Fantastic Fungi? You can really say it was a bona fide hit. How did you spread the word? I remember you talked to my partner, Darlene Fisk, on Instagram Live during the pandemic. And she's like, I bought a ticket to Fantastic Fungi in my town. And then the shutdown came. So how did you spread the word?
Well, we pivoted. We were really successful in community theaters across the country. And we were breaking records in individual cities, but I did it on my own, like from city to city. We opened up in Denver because they were the first city to decriminalize psilocybin, and then we went to Portland and Vancouver and New York, LA. But we just were able to kind of galvanize a movement. Is how I was able to do it, because there really wasn't any other option. I mean, nobody really, I think, understood the film, and we were perfectly, I think, on time with the whole psychedelic renaissance, and that just exploded just as we were releasing the movie. So, to answer your question, we first went theatrical. Then, right after that, we were going to do 500 theaters across the world before the pandemic. It was the middle of March.
Yep.
And we had it all lined up, and I was going to do like a live satellite broadcast to theaters that would have the connection. It was going to be a big deal, a European screening and a midday and all that. And then COVID happened, in the beginning of March. And then, so we had to just quickly pivot. And what we did was all the relationships we had with the theaters, we actually pioneered, and the studios followed this thing called virtual cinema. So the theaters sending out an email blast to their audience, and we still shared, the ticket sales with that audience, even though they watched it virtually, because the whole world just changed, and then I would, Google, Fantastic Fungi during that window, and I go, oh wow, that community theater in Cleveland or in Tulsa or in someplace, showed my film and used the revenue for a food bank to help the people who were suffering during the beginning of COVID. If you recall, we don't have that anymore. But remember, food lines everywhere because there were shortages.
Terrifying. Lexuses, things, Audis would pull up in a food line because people weren't working, right?
Anyway, so that's how it all kind of started. And then, even though we didn't get it to major film festivals, we got 100% score on Rotten Tomatoes. And then it became like the most popular doc on Apple. And it stays in actually the most, popular categories, competing with feature, genre films as well. So, I think it touched a chord. But I also think people are ready for the wisdom of nature's intelligence.
Well, speaking of which, for those listeners who might not really understand it, one of your short films at Global Wellness Summit was about the powers of psilocybin. And, to the outside world, that's really the ingredient in what's known as magic mushrooms, right? That can even help with mental health and healing. So can you tell us more in detail what excites you about those findings?
The research finally, became reactivated at places like Johns Hopkins after like a 25-year shutdown. So the research, with psilocybin proves that people are able to like open up and, look at traumas. Some people claim like, it's like 10 years of, therapy, in one session. So if it helps people unlock things that are buried that they know about or don't know about, especially in conjunction with a skilled therapist, it's great. What we just concluded, which was groundbreaking, I got to tell you, in Santa Monica at St. John's at the Pacific Neuroscience Institute, we ran a clinical trial combining psilocybin with my imagery for patients with alcohol addiction. And we're now just going through the analysis of what the results are.
Wow.
But set and setting is very critical to a psychedelic experience. The experts all say it's 50%. It's probably higher. If you're going to have like an amazing, emotional, heart-opening experience, imagine, do you want to be like with your lover with candlelight dinner, or would you want to be in a white room with fluorescent lights?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the mood is really important. I mean, and people at Global Wellness get it. You design beautiful resorts that put you in that space.
That's right.
Well, that's what is half the component of a journey. And they're going to be, well, there are now already, Amsterdam, Costa Rica, there are, wellness resorts where the medicine, and I think it should be referred to as medicine, not a drug. It was never a drug until a brainless guy named Richard Nixon put it on a schedule, Formula One, along with heroin, etc. So it was never a drug. A mushroom is not a drug. A mushroom, it's a fungal plant. And plants can't be, illegal.
Right.
They're
everywhere.
It's like, I mean, come on, they didn't break any law. Who decided that cannabis, for example, which has helped a lot of people as well, is illegal?
Yeah.
It's crazy. Anyways, the combination of the two, I think, is exciting. I've got clinical trials coming up at UCSF. Also, my visual healing, we put it into the Jacobs Medical Center in San Diego, where every room had a smart TV. And I walked in there, it was like $1 billion hospital. I just checking it out. And I see they have an iPad next to the bed because that's part of patient experience.
Oh.
There is a merging between hospitality and healthcare.
There should be.
Hospitality.
Yeah.
Well, because like Canyon Ranch, for example, they have doctors. And if you go there, you can get a medical, experience, very top notch, obviously. And if you go to some healthcare facilities, they're trying to shift and make the room more beautiful,
like a spa, more spa-like.
Yeah, which is why I said there's a smart TV. You got an iPad there. iPad controls the lighting and the shades in the room, and also is a recording of the medical procedures that are happening, because we are now more intelligent. We want to know what the doctor is doing. We don't put blind faith, people just poking you. So you want to know what's going on, which is great. That's part of patient experience. I said, let's put a question on there that says, where in the world do you want to go to be healed? Where's your power spot? And you give patients choice when choice has been taken away. And so, the options are oceans, desert, flowers, underwater,
mountains,
which is similar to going to a wellness resort, right? It's like you want to be able to just sort of, re-energize your body and your mind and your spirit, But if you're stuck in a hospital bed, you don't have that option.
The least healing environment, right?
But you can. It's not like a replacement, but if you can see the sacred rhythms and patterns of nature while you're there, as opposed to reality TV or CNN or Fox News, it's a difference between what is toxic to what is medicinal.
And you already got that feedback without the study, Louie. You're moving art. People say they calm their babies down. When they're depressed, even people that were facing thoughts of suicide, right?
Correct.
That it calmed them down.
Yeah, teenagers that were suicidal, children with autism, people who have stress, anxiety, post-op, pre-op, and end-of-life anxiety. Which I think is great because it's all the way from the beginning of life to the end of life.
Cradle to the grave, as they say. And you know what I loved, Louie? People haven't seen, I really encourage them, just Google your name or Google moving art or search it on Netflix. But just to see floating and the music and how that holds hands. I mean, I have to ask you, we work with Mindstream, which is a new wellness music label. But I heard you say the importance of audio in what you do. How would you quantify that importance to your moving images?
Well, it's sound energy, and there's light energy, and when they come together into your head, which is like a little, mushroom theater, because there's no screen in your head, but you're seeing all the stuff, which is really light energy. Just think about it for the moment, being translated into electrical, neurological impulses that go through your brain. So the idea of music, can certainly take you on a spiritual journey, and certainly visuals can. And if you're able to, the art of editing is being able to blend them into where one enhances the other. It's like making love. And then it becomes a really, blissful experience.
Well, what I loved is you saying with Lisbeth, I think, that you don't lay it out in your head. You just sort of flow. And every artist I've ever known, it just comes from them. They kind of know when to edit, when to move. And she says she hears the music in her head. So we are the benefactors of that. But, we've been talking about psychedelics and the power of this natural resource. It's appropriate that we talk about that exciting new Global Wellness Institute initiative that you're part of, Psychedelics and Healing. Is that it? Mary Elizabeth Gifford is the chair of that. What excites you about that, Louie?
Well, I'm glad that the conversation now is being, boldly explored inside, the Institute, because, the research is like phenomenal. It has shown that it does help people with PTSD. The success rates are incredible. So look, if we're helping people that are suffering, it's like, what?
What's it all about?
Obviously, we should be doing that.
Right.
But also, I think it's. I mean, for me, the fact that it relates to indigenous knowledge, the fact that it relates to nature's knowledge, let's not be so arrogant and think that we understand everything because we live here. We don't. We're kind of blowing it. So looking at the patterns of other cultures and how these medicines have been used for thousands of years, in really positive ways, not recreational. It's a spiritual journey for those people that want to have that, and for people that can do it with music or can do it with surfing. It's all beautiful, but it's just another pathway. And I just kind of marvel at the fact that why would a mushroom or a plant create a molecule that unlocks serotonin? It's not a drug. The drug is in you already. It's just a receptor that is making you feel a certain way and allowing neural crossover patterns to occur in your brain, so that you're not in this rigid COO mode. It's just for a moment. Why not do that? So you're not. It's really it's a tool.
It's a tool, and
it's just a tool.
What's so great about your work is that you're smart enough to know, without the studies, our society is such that you don't get the credibility. So making those studies real, it reminds me of Larry Dossey, who's one of my favorite docs. He's known as the prayer doc. He was a surgeon in Texas, and he's like, why does everybody pray over someone in surgery? Does it work? So he did a double-blind study, and it took him on a spiritual journey, because he's like, it works. I mean, these people are getting more better than the other people that aren't prayed for. So I'm sure you've had so many aha moments in your work. Speaking of which, I read that your new feature film, Gratitude Revealed, was 40 years in the making. And if I piece it together right, you released small portions of the movie that went viral. Would you say that the Oprah Winfrey interview you did on Super Soul Sundays, was that one of the things that started it to go viral?
It was already viral. That's why she wanted to have me on the show, but not. I wouldn't say that's the only reason. I think there was a connection. The woman who really runs the show turned out to be an executive producer I'd worked with doing commercials in Chicago like 20 years before.
Oh my gosh!
And it was just like a random coincidence. Again, the mycelial network doing what it does, but gratitude is Oprah's major thing, and that's what she says on the show. But the way that happened was because, once COVID hit, I really could have gotten film. But in my library, I've been shooting these magic moments for like a long time and picking up interviews with thought leaders, but mostly remarkable but ordinary people. I mean, some of the notable people in the film, everybody here, will recognize because they've been speakers like Deepak Chopra, Andrew Weil, Brother David, Jack Kornfield. I mean, these are people Paul Hawkins. These are experts like in the wellness / environmental space. But what I also have in there are just like ordinary folk which I think is like where wisdom comes from children to older people. And so I wove it all together because it was something I wanted to do going back to 2014,
Wow.
2011, when I first put out that video, which went viral. And it was the perfect time to do it. And I finally realized the connection to fantastic fungi. When you do a journey with a therapist or even a sacred circle, people know about this stuff, I hope, a little bit. But if you do that in a very safe and respectful way, it's mandatory that the day after you have a day of integration in terms of like, what did you learn? You can't just have an aha moment and walk away.
Yeah.
So, so whatever it was, whether joyful or whether it was difficult, whatever it was, I mean, there's a serious full day of integration with a therapist. So I think that for me, the symbolism of that with going from fungi to gratitude is like, okay, we've seen the wisdom of nature's intelligence. The mushroom showed us what it's all about. Now, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? That's the key. And that's what gratitude is about, because it has all these values about courage, creativity, curiosity, wonder, connection, focus. Sounds like a self-help book that everybody publishes, but it's not, because, these are truths. We all know that these are the things you have to work on, right? And everybody makes a little short book and they sell it for a lot of money, but it's like, it's common sense in that regard. So I just show examples of remarkable but ordinary people that kind of exemplify that value. And then it's up for you to figure out what's the context of that experience, as if you were traveling, and you met a beautiful, rug weaver who shared knowledge with you in some inadvertent way. That's beautiful. That's what travel is, as opposed to being a tourist.
Yes.
You soak up all that stuff, which is why, again, this industry thrives, is because people do travel for the purpose of having enlightening moments when they bump into people and have experiences that are beyond their expectation and unplanned and serendipitous, So that's what I've hoped the film to be, that kind of a journey.
So how did you know it was ready to take to the wide world? And why did you pick the Maui Film Festival a few weeks ago to debut that feature film?
Well, it's ready because we're all suffering from disconnection from this pandemic. And the film screams one thing really loudly. It's that people want connection. People want to hang out with things we take for granted, having food together, playing music together, doing something together. It's like I show all that, and that all came to a standstill, and that's the hardest thing I think people are dealing with right now.
I also think people have learned to describe things from the bad, like, oh, this has been a tough year. I wrecked my car. I did this. I did that. Instead of saying, but wait, I can walk, I can see. That older gentleman that I keep seeing that clip, that he goes, every day you open your eyes and you can see, you should be grateful.
Exactly.
And I think if that can rub off on us and start a ripple effect, right?
Yeah. So look, it's a baby step you can take. The act of gratitude. You're right. I can be grateful that there's food on the table. My fingers move. I can walk. To pull you out of a negative spiral, to pull you out of despair, to pull you out of disconnection. It's maybe difficult for a lot of people. There's no doubt about it. So it's like, here's just a way to like take a breath, and slow down for a sec, see what you can be grateful for, because, the more you fill good thoughts into your brain, the less room there is for the negative thoughts to hang out. And it's just a real easy thing to do without telling you what to do.
Yeah, push the button and soak it up. Now, why did you decide to debut it in Maui? Barry Rivers is an old friend of mine. I used to live on Maui, and that thing has exploded, that festival. I always tease him, he's an old hippie pothead, but he has this vision and this drive, and it came true.
Yeah.
So I can't think of a better place than with the ocean crashing behind you. Is that how you felt?
No, it's great. The beautiful thing is, with Fantastic Fungi, we screened it outdoors, on a beautiful Wailea golf course,
Yep.
Families, picnic blankets, probably about 2,000 people. It's really great. And Also back then, Barry gave me the Visionary award,
Oh,
which it's not a big deal, and it's like you got the Visionary Award from the Maui Film Festival. However, the first guy to get it was the Dalai Lama. I'm the second guy to get it, and at this festival, Jerry Lopez, the famous surfer, received it, the Zen surfer. So, anyways,
it's an honor.
No, I mean, going to Maui is great. Like, how can you not want to go to Maui if someone's going to fly you out there, show your movie outdoors under the stars on a balmy night? I mean, is there anything like you had me at like
Better?
Maui?
So true. So true. But you know what, Louie? I think that listeners need to know a little bit about your origin story. And I've read that, you were raised in Brooklyn by Holocaust survivors. I worked with a man who worked at the Holocaust Memorial. He got, believe it or not, Jehovah's Witnesses in there because no one knew they were also victims of the Holocaust and imprisoned and killed and things. But anyway, so I got close to a lot of people that worked on it. But I wouldn't say, honestly, Louie, that I would think of the word joy or celebration from the survivors I met. So why in the world, how did you find your joy and blossom into this mission from that kind of background?
Well, because I grew up with my parents who in their home practiced gratitude out of necessity. I mean, they had food on the table, a roof over their head, steady job. They had miracle of children. They were so grateful. I mean, what they were experiencing was heaven on earth, in a shitty apartment in Brooklyn.
Compared to the camps, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, compared to the camps. And so they were grateful for that. And I think that, and my mom, I think, was extraordinarily resilient. She worked as a cook at a senior, living home while she, made lunch for everybody and took care of the house. She did everything. And she never said she was tired because that was her joy. That was what she loved doing. The ultimate strong European Yiddish mama, which was like a powerhouse,
A rock, yeah.
A rock and resilient. One of the things, psychology has discovered that people who practice gratitude are much more resilient when shit happens. Could be a little thing like somebody,
which it will. Yeah.
If somebody bumped into you, somebody looked at you the wrong way, somebody, broke your light on the car in the parking lot. I mean, shit happens. And it's like, do you fall into a long, thing? But when people practice gratitude, even when it's more serious than that, they bounce back faster. And in nature, that's really a key. It's really a key attribute is how resilient are you? Plants that are like drought resistant, to be able to bounce back. Those are the survivors, And my parents were survivors.
Yeah, that's how you qualify them. That makes so much sense. And it really is something we should think about because it isn't what I would guess. Now, we have to talk about what keeps you going. I remember a film where you were surrounded by about 1 million monarch butterflies, I think in Mexico City, or Mexico. And here I read last week where the monarch butterfly was officially put on the endangered species list. My niece is a nature lover. She's a farmer. And she wrote me it. And I said, I'm crying. And she said, I did. How do you keep going when you've really tried to help the monarchs,
Well, quitting is never an option. If you're a survivor, and I guess I got survivor DNA in me. So, a pessimist and the optimist can look at the data and they can both agree on the data. The pessimist is going to say we're screwed, and then the optimist is going to say, well, we got to give it a shot, even though they agree that something could be really bad. With the monarchs, I mean, all I can say is I try to show the beauty of their story, which is so fucking grand. A 2,000-mile migration from the great grandchildren that started in Mexico that go from Canada all the way back to the couple of acres in the highlands of Mexico. Who in the world will ever figure out like how they're able to do that? And I don't know, the fact that America is responsible for their decline with the use of pesticides, round up killing milkweed, quote unquote milkweed, along the
Mm-mm-mm.
paths that they migrate. So, and beyond killing, if you're killing the monarchs, you're killing the bees, you know.
Ugh.
So, yeah, it's flying through the Midwest that's the killer on the monarchs,
Mm,
and we have to do something about it.
we do.
They've banned Roundup in Europe, you know, so why don't we ban it here?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And if we can help with this conversation and
Yeah,
opening the eyes to that, and if your moving visual art can really be an impetus to open people's eyes, that's what it's all for. I mentioned your podcast before, Louie. I think it's so much fun. Why did you start a podcast? And what tips do you have to make ours even better?
well, well, I want to do a whole um, thing on wonder and awe. So I'm going to do a movie. I want to do an immersive experience. I'm going to just do a
Ah,
whole thing because I think wonder and awe is the intersection between art and science, and that is bliss, or that is nirvana, whatever you want to call it. So I want to explore that. I want to go deep into it, and I've got the gratitude film that's been out. I mean, I'm doing like dozens of different things, at the same time. During that window of COVID, it was, great to start doing the research and talking to extraordinary people. I mean, the fun thing about talking about wonder, I don't talk to just a scientist. I'll talk to a musician. I'll talk to a kid. I mean, exploring wonder is like, what's your bliss?
yeah.
Really is what I'm asking. And let's get into that. So that's why I'm doing it.
And you also ask people to interact. You're always saying, send your questions. We'll read all the ones. Tell us where you're writing from because we are a community. I love that. Now, just before we go, I would love you to help people see. Like, I remember when you're talking to Elizabeth Scott, I think it was, you said your music, helps us because the reality of the sound when I'm filming often is tourists getting in the way and things like that. So when you start to do, a film on nature, what is the equipment? What's happening? What's the nitty gritty?
Well, I would say like the technical part of it, takes responsibility. It's not a really big deal. The real challenging stuff, as you pointed out, is like these sacred places in the world are disappearing. If I go to Machu Picchu, there's like 5,000 people that are coming in, even though I pay to have a permit to get in there early. I do everything I possibly can that gives me special access, which I think is fine because it's not like it's privilege. It's like
No,
I'm
you have a
sharing
job
this
to
with the
do.
world,
Yeah.
So I need a clean shot with 1,000 people in front of me. But guess what? It's foggy in the morning. By the time, the fog clears, the people are in front of me. There's like thousands of tourists from Asia, and they're all like on WhatsApp or something, That is also my reality. And then what I have to do is I have to like digitally eliminate all that crap so you can see a beautiful time-lapse shot of the fog going through Machu Picchu, which, uh, it's not an alert. It's like that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist today. And so I'm trying to actually give you the sacred experience of what if you imagine being in Machu Picchu alone, which people used to
Alone.
do,
Right.
back in the 50s and 60s, many journeys, I'm sure, like, the full moon at Machu Picchu, everybody talked about that's what they would do. But that's not happening anymore. And neither is it happening at Angkor Wat. Neither is it happening at sacred spaces. And also in places that are far away, Tahiti, Galapagos. We are, climate change is having a negative impact on islanders, on ice melting in glaciers. I'm not being a doomsday guy here. I'm just
You
saying
aren't. You're being
visually,
a realist.
visually, these places are disappearing. So I'm trying to actually capture it so that we can have the spiritual energy of it, just like capturing the last, Beatles performance,
Yeah.
so that other generations could hear that rooftop performance. As an example, nothing
Yep.
wrong with it being digital. I'd rather have it be quote unquote digital than never hear it. I mean,
Yeah.
would any of us have heard Jimi Hendrix? Would any of us have heard, all these artists that are no longer here? When we do we don't hear it live, but we get the benefit of it, don't we?
Yeah, I remember I got to the privilege of working with Tahiti for 12 years because I work in, travel PR and stuff. And I remember flying over the lagoon the first time. My friend said, now this is what James Michener called the most beautiful lagoon in the world. So you're hanging out the plane, but how many people are privileged? I mean, a starting price for a trip to Bora Bora is like $10,000. So people don't realize, it's almost a risk you take too, but you're preserving reality as you can right now before it's too late.
And also, well, I know, but how many people that are marginalized don't have money to go to any of these places, number one. Or if you have money and it's getting more expensive to do it, you don't have the health, or most of us don't have the time,
That's right.
to do it. Like, it's going to takes a couple of days to get to Machu Picchu, 2.5 travel. And it's hard. Even if you go business class, it is hard to get to any of these exotic, distant locations. But if you can get the benefit, the energy of it, that's great. But also to be able to turn young people onto it, because look, no one's going to be going to. How many people are in their lives will ever swim with a whale underwater or go to Galapagos? It's like infinitesimal.
Right.
So I get to share magic moments, with people, and that's cool.
And I seriously thank you for that, Mr. Schwartzberg. But let me ask you something. We'll wrap this up with having our audience look forward. What do you look forward to accomplishing at Global Wellness Summit Tel Aviv? Are you going to be there with us? I believe so.
I hope so. I'm still trying to figure it out with Nancy. I think for me, it'll be very, personally, it'll be emotional because, I made the gratitude film, which, by the way, will be released September 16th. And then we're doing a global virtual screening on World Gratitude Day, September 20th.
How do people find out about it, Louie?
Go to the website, gratituderevealed.com.
Okay, Gratitude Revealed.
So it's releasing in New York, LA, San Francisco. But the film is really, in my heart, dedicated to my parents because, again, we talked about how that's what inspired me to understand the value of gratitude, not from pop psychology, but from survivors who found love and joy in their life. So,
in spite of the odds,
to be able to, maybe we can do a screening, I would hope, in Tel Aviv, but whether it's a psychedelic community or institutions like Yad Vashem, which is remembrance of the Holocaust. I mean, I think it's like the perfect message in that space and
that part of the world.
And then part of the world. It'd be pretty cool to bring that energy there.
Well, Louie, I'm just going to say it again. Your work is a prayer. It's a poem. You have to wear the moniker of a spiritual healer because you can't help it. That was the gift that was given to you. So we can't thank you enough for sharing it with us. Don't give up. Keep kicking. As you said, giving up is not an option. The butterflies need you. The bees need you. We need you. So keep up the great work, Mr. Schwartzberg.
Thank you.